Welcome everybody. This is SharePoint Dev Weekly. This is episode 35.
Yes,
maybe.
Apparently,
I don't know.
Apparently, it says so. It says so.
It says so. Yes, it does. It does. So it is 15th of April. Spring is coming. We're losing all snow in Helsinki, which is awesome. Except the pollen is now jumping in, and that's pretty horrible. So
there's always something. Like
always something.
Snow or pollen is like
exactly. But it's we are heading to the right direction, if nothing else. So summer is coming. Woohoo! Well, on this side of the globe. On this side.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're losing snow. I think the last snow we had is like people don't recall anymore. Like, what is snow?
92.
Yeah. Oh, the winter of 92. Yeah.
Exactly. But to be fair, I think somebody in Twitter, I can't remember which one. Oh, actually, I remember which one was it. Sean Squires had a autumn moment, whatever messaging, and then somebody jumped on the Twitter said, yeah, it's not autumn on this side of the globe, which is true. So you should never actually say we're heading towards the summer or spring or autumn, because then the other side of the globe might, But
yes, so to be truly inclusive, just name the month, but then it's like somewhere between, like we were gonna ship things in September, we're just not telling which year.
Correct. Yes. Precisely.
It's hard, like to be really inclusive of everything, and I was like really not to. I'm
still waiting to the world to actually. Everything goes in waves, right? So you go to a certain level of reaction in a certain direction, and then there's a counter wave, and then a way up and away, and suddenly, sooner or later, the waves go up and down, and then they start slowing it down, and then it go up and down. So I'm waiting for certain things to slow down again. So hopefully, crossing fingers that this is we're already on the verge of going down, hopefully, on certain things. So because I in many of the cases, and this was a discussion point on a technology chat, but it's the getting offended and everything else. I can 100% say I never want anybody to get offended on whatever I'm saying. If I accidentally say something that's offending somebody, I do apologize, but it's like
yeah, but I mean, it's like anything, right? I mean, you can, well, sure, I mean, if there's an offense, if it's clearly an offense, then it's clear, right? But other things, like you can always see it in two ways. You can really look offense behind anything that is being said, or you can give person reason of doubt. Like, I mean, maybe he didn't mean it that way. Maybe he didn't mean it that way, or he didn't thought of it, or he didn't think that is a thing to us. Like, I don't know every culture out there. So if there's something to someone that somebody finds offensive, yeah, I cannot do it. I mean, I don't know what I do not know.
Yep. So therefore,
anyways,
we shouldn't talk about the years either. So let's say we are heading to April, mid-April. April is probably safe.
Well, in typical calendar, yes, but then there are different calendars. Like
that's true.
We're heading to the moment when Helsinki has sun and there is no more snow. That's a fact.
Correct. That is a fact. Yes, that is a fact. That's true. We're also heading to the area where we have quite a few conferences coming up, right? So I actually had my first review of some of my presentations already last week. So which is actually kind of funny because obviously I do like 2 to 3 to 4 presentations in a week, which is so I have like hundreds of slides. And it's like, well, we need to have a review on the presentation structure for Microsoft Build actually this time. And it's like, well, sure, but rather than having a review on the slide structure, I just created the slides. So now they're 90%.
Yeah.
Why would you? Well, obviously you can do planning and everything else, but if you have the material, just create the slides as a structure, and then it's much more easier to actually adjust and balance out.
Well, from your point of view, having done that many shows, yes. But imagine that you are someone new, or you are unsure, or you're speaking about a new topic. Sure. It's way easier to adjust a TOC or outline than to create slides. And so it's like, so we cannot talk about this one. I would rephrase it differently, where this slide doesn't make any sense. So you know what? Just redo all of them. It's like, really?
Yeah. But that's the trick, is that there's always the reviews. You need to always leave some obvious things where people can actually point into, so that they feel good enough.
Just to check if they're paying attention.
Exactly. That's how it works. So, classical things, you're missing a comma, or the bullet points are not consistent. Some of them has comma and some don't have. So yeah, that was by design. But
really,
say that out loud. So, but then people get to contribute. Come on, then we work together. So
yes. No.
Did we just get this one recorded as a good practice? And probably did. So anyway, so what you been up to?
So actually, there's a cool thing. So kind of in a way repeating myself, saying yes, I worked on CLI, but like this time around, we had two interesting things that I thought would make sense to talk about. So one is like at some point, I created the cross-platform setup script for the starter kit, which is based on CLI.
Yep.
And at some point, I got an issue reported that it would break at some point. It turned out to be the case that you were unable to add a web part or add a modern web part to a modern page using CLI. Why?
Yep. Because
at some point, the DOM of the page would change, and then all the DOM-based approach that we used originally in PnP JS and PnP Core, that would change. So it was adjusted there, but we didn't adjust it in CLI. And it was like, okay, so we needed to adjust it because otherwise like the whole thing didn't work. But that proves the point, right? We took dependency on something that is not an official API. Correct. While there is no API, so you can either
there is no officially supported API for the modern
so you can
pages.
Yes, so you can either try to build something by yourself to address the problem or not do it at all, right? There is no middle ground there, right? So we did that and we were hit, and we need to spend some time reworking that. So that that was an interesting one. And then another one, what I would say, another one is that's also an interesting one. Like once in a while, I'm being asked, so when I do things in SPFX, should I use REST or an SDK?
Yep.
And it almost comes to the point where it's religious thing. Right, like people are convinced.
You should never talk about religion in this kind of technology.
I'm not talking a specific religion.
Sorry.
See, a religion. Anyways, that is an interesting thing, right? Because if you think about like there's place for them both.
Sure.
But the interesting thing that people don't really take into account that, like for example, me. I build things in Node. I build things in TypeScript, JavaScript. I build sometimes things in C# and sometimes do things in browser. So I'm all over the place.
Yep.
For me, from my point of view, it makes more sense to know REST because I can learn one call and apply it everywhere. But it comes with a cost. Right? Because on the other hand, SDK has the cool thing that it will give you design time checks. So if you make a typo, you will get build error. Your code will not build. But also does many other things. And one of the things that you never really see in examples, like if somebody has sample of code, like do this with REST, are things that you really have into account. Take into account the moment you want to ship the code to production, which are things like auth, throttling. Error handling and all that, like you don't get that, and a good SDK abstracts all of that away, so you can just do your call and be done with it. Well, whether in REST, you can do your call, but then you have to do all the rest as well for every single call.
And then, well, in most of the cases, if you do that, you would actually end up implementing some sort of a wrapper, and that's actually an
You're
SDK.
Building your
own SDK. So
yes,
that's what it is. So
So from that point of view, like for a long time in CLI, we've been doing exactly like that, right? It was a conscious choice for me not to go with an SDK. Why? Because we do things with AAD graph. We do things with MS graph. We do things in SharePoint. And there's not one SDK for all of them. And not everything that we want to do is exposed through existing SDK. So we would have for some things an SDK, for some things not, and then this SDK would work differently than this one, So across the whole app, we would have to like different way to run tests for even like I thought complexity wasn't worth it, so we went with REST, but then with the conscious choice, okay, we're not supporting throttling, so we're now catching up on that, trying to refactor everything that we have basically to write a wrapper consistent across the board, but then to actually implement all of that.
because you were rushing, but then at the same time, this is actually kind of interesting. You were not really rushing, but you wanted to get something out, and then you realized that maybe we should have actually thought about the architecture, which is a completely natural way of software development.
Yes and no. Yes and no. So on one hand, there is let's say the theory exercise. Let's make it right from the start.
Yep.
But on the other hand, being a product manager, like you can have the best things, but if there is no one to use it, it doesn't make sense.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Right. So the most important thing for us was to check, like, if we ship this, do we get the usage? Are people interested? If they are, then we will have all the time in the world to refactor that. Yep. Of course, the longer you wait, the bigger the load to refactor.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a typical PM thing.
Yep.
Right.
It is.
Like you can try to build it all at once.
Yep.
With the risk that it will miss, or you can try, like, we have an idea. Let's see if that's going to work.
Yeah. Prove that it actually provides value, there's usage, and then after that make the further investments related on it. Yeah. So, and quite often, actually, that's quite often how it works in Microsoft as well, because individual feature crews are almost like startups, and then we need to justify the usage of our resources, and then we need to see, you don't want to invest like a 2 million on a certain thing which you don't know if it's actually worthwhile of investing or not. So you want to see, push something out. Actually, we're going to have an example on let's save the list as a template API. Let's have a look on that.
Yeah.
Even though I said that let's not have a look on that, but let's have a look at that. But that's a good example of a clearly an API which is pushed out to address certain scenario, and then let's figure out later what actually happens. So for the sake that it's in the past, when we were releasing a new version in every single 3 years, it was different. We needed to actually lock everything down, do probably blah, 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 blah. Now it's
because everything you've built, you had to live with for the next X years.
Yes, pretty much 20 years quite often, right? Or 10 years, whatever it is. So
exactly.
Think about supporting now something which you actually designed 10 years ago. It's like
Sandbox.
Yeah, Sandbox. 100%, by the way, supported in on-prem. So, and Sandbox is 100% supported in SharePoint Online, but not the code behind Sandbox.
Yes. Yeah.
So Sandbox solutions still supported. Sandbox solutions with the code behind not supported. So,
yes.
Which was that was already 2 years ago. Let's actually move on. So let's not talk about that.
Nothing to see. Move on.
Yes. Cool. I'm just thinking, what did I did last week? I had actually really interesting. I dropped by in a local university to do a few 2 hours chat related on modern SharePoint and Office 365, Microsoft 365, Microsoft, and my career path and all of that. So I haven't actually graduated from that school, but there was a teacher in the Twitter just who pinged me and said, "Hey, what if you would?" And it's like, it was on my weak moment. I said, "Well, why not?" Actually, but to be fair, I think it's highly beneficial for experienced people to drop by and explain in practice what is it all about. And I think I got a feedback something like the best lecture what we ever had was someone from one of the students, and I was probably being, again, way too open and honest and many of the things.
No, but I guess that is really like, sure, you can sugarcoat, like for example, there is this whole notion about the Valley in the US where things are cool and everything works, and then at the end of the day, you look at how things are and they are not as perfect as they seem to be.
True.
Right, because there is stress, there is long hours. People have a great idea, but they struggle to execute.
Yep.
Right, so sure, it's nice to have the, let's say a romantic view of like where you want to go and technology and all of that. But then there is a reality. At the end of the month, there are bills to be paid.
True. That's one side of the story, and also and still not. Let's not take all sugar away from everything, because at least I love what I do. But
technology is cool, absolutely.
Still the thinking how these things are actually executed and how people actually think through their career paths and everything else is quite often completely different than in reality.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the classic discussions. What I used to have, nobody's asking this anymore. It's like, what are you going to do in 5 years? And one of the Finnish colleagues who has his name is actually Vesa as well. He had a great response. We were chatting about this one a while back, and he said when his manager actually asks, where do you see yourself in 5 years? He
across the table.
Hey, no. He always says, no, that's the wrong question. Where do you want me to be in 5 years is the question. Which is actually a fair point, because if you are let's say receptive or you're a person who can actually adapt different technologies, you're a person who is interested in a lot of stuff, it's not really about where I'm going to be in 5 years, because I want to be cool and make cool stuff. But can you offer me something which is interesting for me to actually stay in the company?
Well, so that is
which is interesting.
Well, yes. But then
if you can do that, obviously, that's super risky as
well. There are still the things like, apparently when you're going to, like, there are two things, and I guess that there will be time when we switch to the links. But one, they say, like, when you're doing whatever is being told you have to do, then you're doing the wrong thing. There's one, and two,
which like, by the way, shouldn't be also understood black and white, right? It's like
sure. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And then another one is that there's the whole thing, the notion of that leadership is not there. There is a difference between being a leader and a boss, right? The leader or the boss dictates we're doing that. The leader hires smarter people than herself or himself, so that these people can do work, and then leader take the obstacles away. So
yeah, or somebody might say that there's a leader and then there's a manager. Manager is the one who's helping you to succeed, and then the leader is the one which might be actually even leading, but basically also making you to succeed as well. But I think, well, there's as many opinions as there are business-oriented books out there which are telling you what is the right opinion on this thing.
Well,
right?
There are even as many opinions as people, but
yeah, that's true. That is true. Absolutely. Anyway, so that was an interesting visit on a school. Anyway, that was a really, really nice break. And then the questions and everything else was really nice to have a discussion. So really, really fun. Something else that's always cool. Anyway, let's actually jump on the articles. So let me share my screen and let me find the right screen, and it's this screen. And let me click you to be visible on that side. There we go. Now I can see you in this screen. It's nice to have so many screens.
Yes. I only have one. Anyway. Perfectly fine.
Okay. So this one, what I wanted to still promote. So last Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I can't remember which day, we released an updated version of SharePoint Framework Developer Training Package. So AKMS SPFX Training is actually the address and the land here. But this is also in the SharePoint Devlog. And we basically introduced 3 new modules, which is using React and obviously our React components, deploying SharePoint Framework components to production, and then build Microsoft Teams customizations using SharePoint Framework. So 3 new modules with hands-on labs, presentation, videos, and demo material. So, and that's really the key point. Once again, repeating this one, for all of the modules, there's a set of assets for anybody to reuse any way they want, which is super important. So. Yep. Really cool.
Nice.
Now, moving on other kind of things which were announced last week. This was kind of cool from Kerem. Kerem is one of the principal program managers from my sibling team, so to say, from Feature Crew team. I'm from the platform team, so to say, and Kerem owns Search and a few other things. And he's a PM on that team. This is something which we technically released as part of the capability was released as part of the March release of Season. I think it was March. Yes, it was. Yes, March this year, maybe. Anyway, but what he's actually sharing here as a Microsoft TechNode Tech Community entry is just the fact that this is how you do that from PnP PowerShell. So you're able to set what is the search scope for the site. Is it a default? Is it a site? Is it a tenant? Or is it a hub site? So basically, what it means is that then when you're searching in the site level, when you're adding a text in the top right corner text box, is it then targeting all sites, that site, a hub site, or what is it targeting? Apparently, hub site option has still some challenges, so we're investigating on that. But the tenant / the site scope is already working properly. So.
Cool.
Right now, this is a site level setting. As you can see here, actually, we are getting a get BMP web, and that means that it's a site level of scope. Don't laugh.
No. So the reason I'm laughing is like there is in UI it's called site. Sometimes it's called sub web. There's the web. There's the site.
Yeah,
and it's like, what do you mean? Just call it SP web and SP site, and everybody knows what they're talking about.
Well, the classic people would know what is an SP web and SP site. I don't think the non-technical developer people would know what is a
non-technical
SP
developer. That is an interesting way to put it.
Citizen developer. Isn't that? No, never mind.
Would citizen developer use PowerShell?
Developer. Why wouldn't they? I don't know. Anyway,
people who wouldn't know, it wouldn't know.
Site level setting, SP web level setting, which it's debatable. Is that good enough? Should it be actually higher level? So we would be able to control that in a higher level as well. Why not? Please give us feedback using the user voice. Ooh. Now, the one thing what we wanted to kind of touch this already, this one was really good from this morning. It is Monday, 15th of April 2019, and this one was from Yannick around the modern save list as a template. And this is really cool stuff. Basically, what Yannick is here offering is a list view command set, which will then open up the panel, and in the panel you're able to download the needed XML or definition for list to be applied or included in the site designs and site scripts. So that's actually pretty cool. And basically you can go to any list and then click Save List as a template, and then clicking the download, you can actually get the needed assets of doing that. Much better, well, this kind of future-proven option. It's a JSON definition of the list which should be created. It's a future-proven option than any of the old classic ways of saving list as a template. Camel, yes. Or STP files. STP files, you can actually do that, unfortunately, because that's actually interesting. That's if we do a historical discussion. So back in 2010, we introduced WSP.
2007.
WSP packages. When you save signed as a template, we actually changed from the STP file type to WSP file. So
yes,
because
but the reason for that is there was the sandbox, right?
And then that came to be the sandbox solution. Yes, you're absolutely correct on that. Now, but for lists, we didn't do that. So for lists, if you still go to the classic UIs and classic SharePoint 2019 and save list as a template, there's still a fix. There's a buttons available for that. It will actually save an STP file, which is actually a binary file.
I do not dare to ask why.
Yeah,
I do not dare to ask why. I think I know why, and I will not ask that. Let's move on.
That's a fair point. So it's a fair point. Also, resourcing usage,
yes.
Those things, they have a big impact. But this one is really cool. So Yannick has actually investigated how the site designs and site script PowerShells are working. And what was interesting here, let me actually pinpoint this from here. Here's the GitHub example in his own GitHub. And if we go to the source, and he created services, and there's a site design service. And in the extraction of the list as a template, or as a site design, get the site script from the list. Here's the URL. And before we went to the actual articles, we talked about the fact that, well, maybe there's a scenarios and features which we push out and then we change them and all of that. This API has not been documented, so officially it's not actually supported to be called by a third party, which is one discussion point. Also, the URL of that API seems pretty funky, doesn't it?
Pretty internal.
Yeah, pretty internal, but it's just descriptive. It's descriptive.
Yeah, it's the namespace, the fully qualified. No, it's not really the fully qualified, but it's a namespace plus method plus class named method.
Yeah.
As whole. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it is super powerful API, no doubt. But clearly this is something which we need to work on internally to make sure that it's properly exposed and it's also documented if people want to use this, rather than leave it as it is, because this implies that we might actually change the API anytime, which would then break the functionality.
Yes.
Good. Moving on things, super cool from Yannick, so please check it out. Moving on things, this is from Harsh around extension list view command set for unpromoting news. So this basically for the scenario where, let's see if I can actually zoom in as a live thing, where you accidentally promote an article as a news, but then you want to unpromote that as a news, a way to be a news. So pretty cool UI, is pretty cool layout, and I think the presentation and everything looks pretty like professional, which is really cool. Relatively simple scenario, but makes perfect sense. And how do I get? Here we go. I don't typically use the zooming, so that's slightly bustle. Now this one was from Marco Barbosa and around property-based dynamic fields here. So this one is really around the fact that here we go. So you have a property fields which you're then dynamically filtering based on, in this case, department, and then the members are being filtered based on the department selection, which is kind of cool. And then you store that selection in the properties of the web part. Now, how do we actually make that happen? Is that he has a code examples and all of the stuff here based on the selection, based on the keys, based on all of that, how things actually might be working in practice. So really cool. And quite useful setup as well.
Yep.
Good. This one was from David Ramalho, actually also from Pine Tuning, like the Marco as well. So disable footer on communication site and subsite. David does more PowerShell scripts and quite not a hugely, let's say, dramatical PowerShell script, but the key point being on this one in here, which is relatively new CSAM API, which is the footer enabled, which is basically then controlling is the footer visible in the communication sites. And by default, the footer is visible in all of the communication sites, which might be slightly confusing because it was enabled by default for everybody, like out of blue. I think we did a admin message on that, but it still was kind of enabled for everybody.
Which is good. Like you get more value for the money that you've already paid.
Well, if the footer would not have been enabled, then nobody would have known that there's a footer capability in first place. So it is kind of debatable. And this one, we had a Hugo Bernier did a live community call demo last week. We had a really huge Skype Nado or Skype Balupsi, whatever. So we had some issues with Skype server side, and that was I think we hit like 210 attendees, and then some few video persons had a video on, and then that completely started scrabbling down. I don't know if it was related on the videos or the number of attendees, but then and then it took a while for us to get back on the normal thing. But what's really cool around this one is that he actually did a reverse engineering for file picker. So out of the box file picker, to implement exactly the same looking file picker as we have out of the box for first-party web parts.
Nice. This is nice. And I guess, like in a way, you could say every single time you build something that needs the experience to be able to select a file, you need this. So
correct.
It almost like begs like the question: why isn't there one already available, either first-party or third or PnP one?
Yeah. So, and that's something, obviously, this is a good reminder for us internally that we need to figure this one out quite fast. We have to start providing first-party controls or then, if nothing else, agree that there's a PnP property controls way of exposing similar kind of capabilities for third-party. Because picking a file is like of course, that capability has to exist.
Yes, absolutely.
And why wouldn't we expose that as an out-of-the-box functionality rather than everybody forced to implement that? So,
well, I guess and I guess that in the end, there's also so the benefit to Microsoft if whatever is being built by everyone else looks and feels the same way as things that are available out of the box, because that allows the customers to train the users once and they can use anything and everything, as opposite to this thing look like that and then the other one like that, and like why they are different.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. No, And by the way, this web part in general is a beautiful work of implementation. So it is a relatively like an edge case scenario where Hugo is showing this with a Marvel whatever images, but it's actually really nice implementation. Property panes and all of the rendering and everything else is really nicely done. So great work over there. Cool, and you can actually do the compare of the images here, and all of this rendering is really, really nice. So really great sample. Now, this one was from Mark D. Anderson, related on creating and deploying a custom theme in SharePoint Online. Really good article as well, 2 minutes read. Depends on how fast you read. But basically...
on average.
On average, yes. How do you control the theming? What are the things and theming options? What are the key values there? And how do you actually get? How do you define that using JSON? And then you actually run the add SPO theme, whatever the name for your theme is, to actually get it available in the site collection level. Oh, sorry, in a tenant level. And then you're able to apply that. And there's quite a few articles related on theming, and also the theme builder is a really important thing for this context as well. But cool stuff. Good recap on how things actually work. This one was from Julie, from the same company as Mark. So around NPM version usage. So basically upgrading a version of SPFX solution with a specific version. And actually, Waldek explained me the tagging and everything else, because we're not using this in the engineering as such. But basically, the problem was that if you don't have this kit here and you do run the NPM version, the tags were not properly applied. And the tag would be applied for tracking, for example, this is the version which we released. And this one was the 1.1 version. This is 1.2 version. It's almost like labeling back in TFS timeframe.
Yes.
So that's what it is. So. But good usage, good clarification, good reminders how it actually works. And then the final one was from Nakeran Natarayan. Restrict permissions on editing SharePoint SPFX property pane configurations. We wanted to talk about actually this one. This one was kind of an interesting thing. So what are we doing here is that we're reading the permissions of the user. And then in this case, we are basically adding, is it disabled or not based on the permission of the user. So does a user has the manic web permission for enabling the property text point. And in this case, as an example, if you don't have the sufficient permission, then the description text box would be disabled. Now, it is, however, highly, highly important to realize that all of this kind of a JavaScript level manipulation of permissions can be tricked using console. So you can just do an F12 and modify settings. And especially in this kind of case where this description field is just a property of the web part, and doesn't actually, there's no API which is getting called behind of the scenes. Obviously, if there would be let's say an administrative API behind of the scenes getting called, that has server-side permission checking, and therefore you would not be able to anyway do that. And anyway, that doing this kind of a checking is good. Do not expose properties for end users which they cannot actually modify. So makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Cool. That's it from a article perspective for this week. Any last words? Any thoughts? What are you planning to do this week?
That's a good one. We have quite a few things going on at Rancor with new version of the health check tool that we have that allows you to find issues in your tenant. So we're trying to dot the last I's and cross the last T's to have it shipped, because we have quite a few adjustments there. So that should be available this week. So it will take probably some of my time to check that it's sound. Yeah. Other than that, from the CLI point of view, we keep developing that, and we keep refactoring things. We have a few things in mind, one, as I said, to work around the HTTP calls and to work that into SDK so that we support things like compression, throttling, and so forth and so on. Yeah. And then another one is there will be a breaking change login. Currently we have different, when you want to, or the commands that we have organized in CLI are organized per API. So if we call things through Graph, we organize them onto Graph. If we call things on SPL, right? So in order to interact with Teams, you as a user need to know how we thought about it, whether we use AAD graph or the Microsoft graph, which is in a way odd. So we want to get rid of that and just expose commands through the services and not the API. So you'll be able to just say O365 Teams, and whether we use AAD graph or MS graph, that is irrelevant to you. And then also another thing is to authenticate only once, because now we say you have to separately authenticate to graph, separately to AAD graph, separately to SPO. And to be honest, the original idea that we have is that you might, in theory, use different account for one and the other. In practice, do people do that? I don't think so. I don't know. But it feels like they know, like they just want to have like one thing and do it. And the cool thing is that in AAD, you have the notion of multi-resource refresh token.
Tokens.
So once you obtain it once, you can then request access token for anything you want across the whole.
You have granted obviously that.
Of course,
Still, as long as and can you kind of repeat what it means? You have a SharePoint access token.
Yeah. So
the resource is getting changed.
Well, so in AAD, you have the notion of a resource, and a resource being a service. Imagine like SPO or MS Graph or AAD Graph or even
Teams.
EWS.
Teams is Graph. Teams is Graph.
Yes, exactly. So the resource being the API to which you want to talk. And in a way, think about it. And there's also an interesting thing. SPO is in theory 3 resources: the regular sites, the OneDrive, personal OneDrives, and the admin side. Because resources are isolated by domain name. So in a way, for each domain name, you have to have separate access token. The cool thing about AAD is that it works with OAuth, right? So if you want to have an access token, you have to go through the OAuth flow, meaning you have to do a request, you will get a code, then you can exchange the code for a token. So it's quite a going back and forth. But there's also the notion of multi-refresh refresh token, which is MRRT for short, right? So once you have a token, once you have a refresh token, you can exchange it for access token to another resource. So imagine that first I obtain a token for the Microsoft Graph, and then I think, oh yeah, but I need to call SPO for this thing. I can just use the refresh token that I got from the Microsoft Graph and exchange it for access token to SPO. And I can just go back and forth between resources without having to bother the user or have to go through the whole complex flow back and forth, because oftentimes it's multiple calls, right?
But which actually comes back on we talked about this topic actually back in when I was in Amsterdam, Den Haag actually, or was it in Amsterdam? There was the Microsoft Tech community, tech like 3-4 years ago, something like that.
Yes,
we talked about this exactly the same topic, because we did a fiddler dance with an HTTP to flip the access to the target resource. The downside of that, well, not a downside, but that reminded me on something which relates on why aren't we as a Microsoft making it more easier for people to actually do this in practice, which relates on the SDK discussion.
Yeah, but that would be an SDK, but then you would have to have a Microsoft or Office 365 wide SDK. And
that is correct.
Who would be owner of that?
Or Azure AD Access Token SDK or something like that.
Well, there is one already. So you have the ADAL and MSAL, and they allow you to do it, but they still need to they still require you to tell, I want to have an access token for this, and then for each one they have like a number of flows, right? So there is the on behalf of, there is device code, there is the and so forth and so on, right? So there are 4 or 5 flows from which you can choose depending on what you want to achieve.
Sure.
But there is still nothing that will tell you, I need to call X. And
exactly.
Here are
That's what I'm basically looking for.
My credentials, do it.
Correct, because when you think of it, we're still in a Microsoft 365 or Office 365 level, and the fact that you should be able to access one resource and another one should be like done, not magic, because we're still talking about this to be, well, not magic, but still additional dancing and additional requests here and there.
Well, so, I'm not putting anybody here on the spot, but in a way that Office 365 CLI has the ambition to be the 365 wide thing. That I think that over time PNP PowerShell will get there too, as it already goes into things like Teams and so forth.
Yep.
If there was a Office 365 client-side SDK, I would expect PnP.js to be the thing, and then that would abstract away all the auth.
Sure.
And I know there's plenty of work to be done, and Patrick and the whole team are doing their really best to offer as much value as they can. But I would say that probably they have the same ambition too, right? Just to offer like one SDK that you can use as Office 365 developer to access anything you want in there in as simple way as you can.
As simple as possible, because it's just a classical thing, like you mentioned, and we're spending way too much time on this, but this is a good discussion. So in the case of CSAM or the PnP PowerShell or the PnP CSAM extension, it is exactly the same challenge. If you operate against SharePoint, you have a different auth model than you operate against Teams. And then now there's an ongoing discussion related on, well, we're introducing now the Teams support to the engine, and with an extraction and applyment and everything else. So how do we authenticate? Should we drop the classic authentication modes completely or not? Then at the same time, sorry to even say this out loud, native SharePoint Online PowerShell only supports authenticating with a user ID and a password or multi-factor authentication. There is no app ID and a secret way of signing it, which is again limiting factor, because it would be awesome to be able to use these things centrally.
Yeah, but again, it's like these are the artifacts that we carry from way back in the past.
True.
And we see that especially topics like identity, they evolve a lot, because now we have MFA, conditional access, and so forth and so on. And so there are all the cool features that are available in AD Premium.
Yep.
And then you want to use things like PowerShell or an API, and it's like, yeah, you cannot do that. Like, no, like you want to be able. Yes, exactly. And then also things like the moment you verge into .NET Core, let's say on Linux, well, there are no things like Windows Credential Manager.
Yep.
So you also have to think about that. Like the pond gets bigger, and there are more things to take into account the bigger you want to go, right?
Sure.
And it's like not enough to say, well, that will run only on Windows by someone who is running on Windows 7. Like, no.
Definitely not. It only works in the Windows Vista, so never mind.
Nothing wrong with that. Let me open a laptop for that.
Exactly. On that bombshell, I think it's good to close. We all know the challenge around there, and yes, we are working on trying to address those. But it's an interesting challenge. It's a long-lasting challenge, the identity handling and aligning on the one authentication model. That would be.
But I think that AAD is in that place already.
True.
And it's just a matter of time for everybody to get to the point, like, this is the way we want to do it. And and at that point, it's just a matter of resources and people stopping being part of the problem and being part of the solution.
Yep, that's true.
Which is hard, but in the end, we need that. We all need it. Right?
You mean that we can't just complain? So you mean that we?
Oh, you can complain whenever you like.
Exactly.
I mean, this is family show, so I will not say something. But yeah, it reminds me of a teacher who I had at my school. It was really good.
But you can't actually.
No. I will not go there. But if you ever see me and you recall this moment, ask me about it, and I will tell you.
But yeah, so and to be fair, that reminds me, and let's close up after this one. But that really comes down on the fact that the community actually is the community can actually help Microsoft to succeed on these things as well. Your feedback is super important, but the feedback should not be like, "Hey, this sucks," because that's not constructive, that's not beneficial. Be rather part of the solution and offer a solution, or offer help, or offer some suggestions, and those are good, because then we can work together towards the right end goal. Pointing somebody and says, "Hey, you're doing a lousy job," doesn't actually help anything more. That you used your energy on actually wrong things. You didn't.
You vent, and then in the end, nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. It's still exactly the same. You'd rather use your same energy to solve the problem or drive towards the right problem. Some of the problems are long-lasting and they're not solved like that, but pushing things to the right moment and right way, right direction is already a start. And that's something, and I think we're getting there one step at a time in IT communities as well. I think less and less we can see direct attacks in the Twitter or whatever, which is good. But I think we still need to learn to work together even more efficiently.
Yeah.
But I think that's it for this week. So thank you, Waldek. Thank you for people who are watching us ranting, right?
I mean, the cool thing, there are two cool things about it. You can always set it to 1.5 speed, and you can skip over parts you find less interesting.
When it's recorded, yeah, that is true.
Yes, there we go, right? So even if it might take us longer to get to the point at times, hey, you can skip all of that.
That is true. We'll come up with a new webcast
next week.
SB Dev Weekly in a week. And we should have a visitor next week waiting already in the pipeline. So.
Wasn't next week on Monday? Aren't we off because of the?
That's actually true. It is a Eastern holiday, so it will come out one day later, most likely. Yep. Perfect.
We'll figure it out.
Excellent. Bye-bye.